Welcome to Two Chicks Talk Writing. I'm Isabella.
And I'm McGee.
Welcome to our show.
Today we finish our discussion on the shifting sands of publishing. What is right for you, indie, hybrid, or with a publisher?
What has been your breakout book?
The first book that I self-published was Moving Violations.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not sure if I caught lightning in a jar or if I just hit at, I did what the marketing lady said to do from the Book Lovers Convention, and I happened to hit a week between major publishing uploads. I don't know. You know, I read it and there's parts where I think, well, you know, now I know maybe I oughtn't to have done it quite this way, but I'm pretty proud of it still. I can't remember which author it was, but someone told me until they had 12 books on the market, they didn't start to, as you were saying, wag the dog, you know, with the volume of books. So that seems like a lot. But if you'd have told me 5 years ago I'd have 5 books out in 2 years, I'd have laughed in your face. So
Yeah.
you never know. But,
Right.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to an author who's listening to this or considering, and there's all those memes about, how do you know you're an author? But what advice would you give to that writer out there who's thinking about publishing?
I guess the first thing that I would say is you have to believe in your story. But you also have to realize that the average number of Les Foot books published is 200 in sales or so is what I've read a number
That's
of places.
the average, yeah.
And if you are going to self-publish and make $2 a book and pay an editor $1,000 and $1,500 for a cover artist, they'll be happy to take your money. But I think you need to be realistic in putting your best foot forward, and also knowing that it's okay to use Canva or something to make a cover that's good enough. It's okay to, get your cousin that's an English major to do your editing for copy edit stuff. But at some point you are going to have to put out for that. And so that's where publishing houses at least give you would hope you would at least give you that perspective of, is this thing marketable as it sits? And that's what they're going to shoot for. You're still your marketing team. So don't think that you're going to just get a publishing house and I'm going to just wait for the check to show up, because you've got to become Barnum and Bailey. Let's step right up. So that will not, no matter how you bring your book to the market, it is your, again, brand, for another time, but it's your promotion of it, and having a story that people go, I want to read that, is the first step. So if you're a storyteller and your friends are like, I love hearing about your book, then we all have that moment. Well, what are you writing? Well, see, there's this girl, and then there's this other girl, and we all do that, but I think you have to be as excited about your story as you want your readers to be. And every story needs to be told. Every book has its audience. It just may not be the number of people that you would like it to be, so that you can buy a mansion and a yacht, to quote Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I sat in on, as a publisher, I was at a publishing conference, and the big publishers, Penguin, Random House, Clifton, all of those, basically are saying the same thing right now. They are spending, where they spend their capital and where they spend their money is on the Dan Browns and, the Karen Slaughters or the J.R. Wards. They spend the bulk of their advertising on those authors because the return on investment is so high that that's what they're doing. Now, and in this conversation that's being had, I'm sitting next to a former editor of one of these publishers who said, yeah, I went from being this executive down to this, and finally I'm an editor. And, I started with the company 15 years ago, and now I'm looking for a job because they are cutting so much of their services to include editing and, cover design and things like that. And a lot of those publishers, and there was publishers and agents, one of the things all of them said was when they come to, an author submits to them, one of the first questions they ask them is, how many followers you got on social media? How active are you? What are you doing on social media? Because they want to know you got as much skin in the game as they do. They want to know what is it, because we have limited resources as publishers. And if you're publishing, their mid-list authors they're hoping for a breakout in those mid-list authors, but ultimately the money's going someplace else. And if you can cover your costs, then you'll stay with that publishing company, because, I've known some authors who, every time they went to go sign their next book, their print runs went considerably down. One particular author I know of finally got to the point where they just said, yeah, we're just going to release this as an ebook. We're not even going to make it a print book because there's just too much, we're not going to do a print run. Now, if you hit, 25,000 copies, we'll do a print run then, of course. And, I don't know that that's incentive, but I think it's reflective of the market that's happening right now. And I think that if you want more control over your book as an author, then probably self-pubbing is where you want to be.
But the skill set that you need to have includes editing or identifying a good editor. It includes cover art or being able to identify what doesn't suck for a cover. You have to be able to do the marketing and to do the information that needs to go there, the branding and all of these financial ends that come with it as well. There's some issues with that. And if you can't do all of those things, and heaven forbid you have a full-time job. I mean, I don't know how people do it, that they, they got to go 40, 50, 60 hours a week somewhere else. And then, and they're going to write in their free time. And, they haven't seen their wife in 4 weeks, I mean, it's just, so I think people need to give themselves a break too. You don't have to do it all. And,
well, and I think, as publishing changes, where it was 10 years ago is nowhere where it was 20 years ago. It's kind of like the stock market. Once you started allowing software and you allowed the average Joe to go into the stock market really changed.
Yes.
Once the average person could start investing for themselves, that changed. But it also came with risk and reward. There were some risks, there were some failures, and then there were some rewards. And I think publishing is kind of on that trajectory as well. Nobody knows what's going to happen 10 years from now. Amazon's so big right now that I don't see how other companies like Smashboard will stay competitive if Amazon keeps gobbling up all the content and all the companies, because they're ultimately they start to become a monopoly, and they've monopolized the industry. There's been lawsuits against Amazon, antitrust lawsuits and things like that on how they're controlling the market. So I know that's the elephant in the room. It's kind of the devil that you have to dance with. All these metaphors.
But you must be a writer.
You have to know what it is you want out of this before you start this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many measuring sticks, and that's subjects for another time in terms of reviews and contests and monetary and rankings on Amazon. How much is that number one sticker worth to you? What does it mean to readers? I think there's a lot of threads to that perception of, yeah, you wrote a good book, and what do you need to feel that validation or
I think writing the book is 10% of it. 90% of it is doing your homework, setting up a brand, figuring out how you want to do this. Are you going to be self-pubbed? Are you going to be hybrid? Are you going to go with a publisher? There's pros and cons to both sides. But if you don't sit down and have a plan, and I'm not saying, okay, I wrote this book, yay me, here it is, and now I'm going to publish it. What does that mean to you? What is when authors should be asking themselves, it's kind of like planning a wedding. You can plan a wedding 2 weeks before it happens and have that wedding. You can plan a wedding 3 months before it happens and have that wedding. You can plan a wedding 6 months to a year and have that big, huge, moving parts, fantastic, DJ, whatever, 10-tier cake, 500 people, beautiful dress. Obviously, money's a factor, but the experience of each of those is going to be different. The 2-week wedding is going to be just what it is, a 2-week wedding. The 3-month wedding is going to be a little more effort, thought went into it. Because the wedding's just the wedding. It's all the planning and thought that goes into it. And that's what I would say to authors is, what kind of wedding do you want? Yeah, I wrote this book. I could literally go in and put it on Amazon, hit send, upload, put my book blurb, whatever blurb I have in there. I didn't want to get it edited. I don't care. Boom, it goes. Or you can go the next step and say, let's get it edited. Or I'll just have some beta readers read it. I don't want to invest in it, And my cousin Louis can do graphic design. So, I know he only does cars, but, I know he can put two chicks on.
How hard can it be? Yeah.
How hard can it be? Throw a Facebook page up there. Do I need a website? I don't know if I need a website. Do I need an Instagram page? I don't know if I need an Instagram. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Because publishing is always going to be publishing. It's just going to have different iterations of it. Ultimately, you as the author have to figure out how you're going to engage with that world. Is it going to be published, self, hybrid, fully?
And not unlike your analogy, if the person you marry is the wrong person, it doesn't matter whether it's the 2-week planning or the 2-year planning. In the end, you're still stuck with that schmuck. So your book has got to be your best foot forward.
Absolutely.
I'm a natural learner. I love to learn new things. And I realize that some people do not.
I think in the publishing world, in some ways, it's not very forgiving. A cigar vendor said it takes 30 years to build a relationship with a client and 1 minute to ruin it. So if your book took a year to create, took a year to make that baby, it just takes one mistake to screw it up for the rest of its life. There's that book and the whole story. I don't know if you remember about a book called The Semen. And I think that's the name of it. And the author self-pubbed it. And people, obviously, the title, The Semen, started trashing it. And then some people read it and gave it bad reviews. And then the author went in and just trashed the reviewer.
Ooh.
And so there was this dialogue, and it got pretty heated, and it made the publishing news. And it was like, as authors, don't ever do this. You're going to get a bad review. Let it go. Right. Your relationship, it takes a year to make a book. It takes 1 minute to ruin that relationship with a reader. Well, and social media has added a whole new level to publishing now too. Years ago, it was important. 10 years ago, Facebook was important. it was a way to reach other like-minded people. We saw a lot of lesfic reading groups pop up. They did, one particular group who this woman is just wonderful. She doesn't do it anymore, but every weekend she would have an author interview. And she would have authors come on and readers would come in and ask questions and everything. And it really just became it became so popular that everybody wanted to go in and do this because her numbers really went through the roof.
Sure.
It was again, Facebook was young, it was growing. It didn't know what it wanted to be when it grew up. So it really took off. But social media has added such another element to publishing that I'm not sure, a lot of times when we get submissions, we ask authors, what's your platform look like? Well, I'm not on Facebook. Okay, Twitter? Oh, I don't tweet. Okay. Instagram?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. We're just going to stop right here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's had a big influence, on publishing in good ways and in bad ways.
Well, and as a reader, I have to say the things that I choose to read are influenced by some of the things that I see. That is probably the biggest piece that I'm curious to see what the future will look like in terms of the whole process of books and how you get them and how you find out about them. And, if it's not trending, will you have any traction ever? And I don't know, but it circles back around to why you're writing it and knowing that a publisher has an eye and a marketing situation that you are not. And just because a publisher doesn't want to publish it doesn't mean that it's not a good book, doesn't mean it can't find traction, doesn't mean it doesn't have an audience. It just means you don't fit their silo.
So here's some advice I would give, authors who are thinking about going with a publisher. Do your homework first. Look at who they publish, look at what they publish. Is that, do you fit into their catalog? YA is really popular in mainstream right now. It's a harder sell in lesfic, a much harder sell.
So many things you can't write about.
Right. Right.
And it's not easy. Just because it's for kids doesn't mean the book is easier to write.
Well, and then you have new adult, which takes it a step up, 18 and over now. And still, there are some things you can't still do in new adult. If you get a phone call from a publisher who says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your book, you should have questions you want to ask that publisher too. Because it's a relationship and it's a business relationship. So let's be clear. It's a business relationship. And you should be asking questions of them. A lot of times when I talk to authors, I'll say, hey, I want to talk to you about your book. Well, this is great. I'll say, hey, we really like the book. We'd like to publish the book. Here's what we do. Here's how it goes. Do you have any questions for me? I will say 9 out of 10 people are like, no, gosh, no, I hadn't. And when I email them and say, hey, we'd like to talk to you about your book, I'm thinking you probably should do some homework at that point, because I'm going to call you and say, so what do you think? You should have some questions, for the publisher. You should want to know, what are their expectations of you? What is it you need to do to make your book a success? And what is it they're going to do? What is it they're doing? And ask those questions. Don't just be a passive passenger on the train, because it could be a great relationship or it could not be a great relationship, depending on, what you know and what you find out.
And it's more than just percentages, although that's a good place to start.
Sure.
What is your commitment to the future? Are they going to take your book and put it on a shelf for 2 years because they have first rights? Or are they going to give you 2 months to reject it? Or all those things come into it. And, if you are expected to produce 2 to 4 books a year, or are you limited to 1 book a year? And those are questions that I've seen in a lot of people's contracts, and they never thought to ask themselves that. And, of course, if the publisher loves your stuff and they want to publish more, that's a good problem to have, but it still could be a problem.
Right. No, and you're right. I mean, there are some companies who, want 3 books a year or 2 books a year, or are happy if you just put out 1 book a year. There are publishing companies that will only do ebooks, and you have to hit a certain amount, and then they'll do a print book. Do I get a say in my covers? You should ask that. Do I get a say in my covers? What happens if the editor and I don't get along? Who has final decision, deciding power over those edits? It's not just, oh, here's my book, run with it.
Yeah, I do have an acquaintance that we have chatted about experiences with editing, and some of the things that that author was so furious about. I'm like, who cares? just change it. It doesn't matter.
Well, and I think that, unfortunately, some authors also come into this thinking, this is the best book and it's going to make you and me a ton of money, honey. I'm telling you that. Like, well, it's a good book. We all want to make, look, when we publish a book, we don't want it to do badly because we lose money just as much as you lose money. We put as much effort into that and make sure that it's got good covers, good editing, good layout, all of those things, because we're putting our name on the line, we're putting our money on the line. And, I think that as an author, you've got to give it your best college try. And as long as you ask we're all on the same page, we're all, playing from the same rule book, we all understand what the rules are, then it's going to be a great relationship. There have been a couple of divas who I've been like, ping, see you later, thanks. Because it's hard. You're not J.R. Ward.
Well, and it does remind me of rock bands where they have that great breakout album and then they hit that sophomore slump, because the first album, they worked the song for 10 years going up and down the coast doing their bar gigs. And then the second album they wrote in the bathroom at Waffle House, and now they can't understand why it stinks and no one wants to hear their songs, So I think there's, something to be said for that book you've worked on for 6 years versus the one you just
threw together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I think that every book is a different experience. And that's why I think that the publishing world has so much to offer for authors. You have choices now, which is they didn't have before. When you sent it to the big publishing houses, it either 99% of them ended up in the slush pile. So now with smaller publishers, with self-publishing, there are fewer barriers, fewer gatekeepers, and a lot of opportunity out there for people who want to work for it. And that's not to say, hey, if you just throw it up there and you go, oh, I don't care. It's about my great Aunt Carol who survived, whatever. And that's all I care about. Think that's okay too. That's okay too. If you want all your 340 cousins to go buy that book and that's all you're worried about, that's okay too. But there are now opportunities for anybody who's writing to publish.
And now a tip of the day from the Writer's Toolbox. Don't need an agent. You do not need an agent because, let me quantify that. If you think you're going to send it to Penguin, then maybe you need an agent. But if you are going to do the typical Liz Fick book, you can approach the publishers directly. For the love of God, read the directions on their website, because one person wants it in 12 new time, whatever, and the other one wants, a margin of this and a margin of that. And if you can't follow those rules, they don't want to work with you. They can't. You don't pay attention. So read the dang directions.
That's true.
If you have something you want to hear us talk about, make some comments below.
Check out our Two Chicks Talk Writing website at www.2chickstalkwriting.com. You'll find all of our past podcast episodes there, as well as some tools and tips and freebies you can download. You can also check out our Facebook page, Two Chicks Talk Writing, and our Instagram at 2 Chicks Talk Writing.